Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Unlocked Show. I'm your host, Tracy Wilson. You guys are in for an absolute treat this morning because my very special guest is an absolute expert when it comes to communication. So I want to say to you guys, if you've been thinking about, gosh, are my presentation skills or my communication skills actually up to scratch? If I were placed in a room with, some of the world's biggest businesses and I had to do the pitch of my life, would I be able to actually stand up there and give a presentation that was both engaging, that hit all of the right points, that was succinct, and actually got me sales or landed me my job? Now, when we think about communication, right, we think about that as today. I've talked about it in the sense of generating more sales. But don't get me wrong, communication is fundamental in every aspect of our life, whether it be business, whether it be trying to communicate with your friends, your family, your children. It is the most important thing, because if you get it wrong, boy, things can go terribly bad. So let me introduce you to the amazing Brenden. Now, I'm going to hopefully pronounce his name correctly. Kumarasamy, who's come to me all the way from Montreal in Canada. He is an expert when it comes to communication. He sits in the top 1% of communicators in his industry. So if you want to brush up on your communication skills, I would absolutely recommend you turn everything off, you put your total attention here, and you listen to what this amazing man has to tell us about how to brush up on our communication skills. So welcome to the show, Brenden. It is absolutely fantastic to have you here. Can't wait to hear all of your tips, tricks, and little tools that you have to offer us about how to brush up on our communication skills. Welcome to the Unlock.
Tracy, it's an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be on.
You're very welcome. Now, I know your history. It goes right back to like kind of high school. And we were talking a little bit earlier about, I suppose, your pastimes. I mean, I know when I was growing up, we played a lot of sport. My kids certainly played a lot of football and rugby and, that kind of stuff. But you kind of had a different type of sport, didn't you, that you really excelled at? So tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely, Tracy. So the story started when I was in college. I went to business school and I did these things called case competitions. Think of it like professional sports, but for nerds. So while other guys my age are playing rugby or cricket or baseball or some other sport you probably wouldn't see me playing, I was doing presentations competitively. And that's how I learned how to speak. But then as I got older, Tracy, I started coaching a lot of the students in those case competition programs. Not because I was a great coach, but because the alternative they had was a rock. So they picked me. Then I started helping them. And then I got really good at it. And that's what sprung the idea for Master Talk, the YouTube channel specifically, because I realized that everything that was in my head wasn't really available for free on the internet. So I started making videos in my mom's basement. A few years later, Master Talk turned into something I never could have imagined.
Isn't it interesting? I mean, that's such a cool journey, and to have, grown up, I suppose, playing this sport and then turning that into, a lifelong passion and career is really an amazing thing to do. But, isn't it interesting that we're born, we then start to learn to talk, and we start communicating at a very, very young age, but we never really get to learn how to communicate effectively. And what happens as we grow up, we sort of start to maybe communicate in ways that are not serving us in the best way they possibly can, and then we realize that, gosh, communication is such an important factor in everything that we do, and we start to explore this a little bit more, a bit like you did, right? So getting really good at this and then realizing that, hang on a minute, because I'm imagining that you then started looking for more information about how you could sharpen your tool as a communicator and found nothing. So let's go back to, those times when you were sitting in mum's basement and you're thinking, gosh, I need to do something with this. I've done some research. There's nothing out there. What happened next?
Yeah, absolutely, Tristan. And by the way, for the record, and all my CEO clients know this, I'm still in my mother's basement. It's just my basement is a lot more successful. I just stay in my basement to spend time with her because she's getting older. But yes, so when I was in my basement, the first thought I had wasn't really around business. It was more around a hobby. I started watching a lot of YouTube videos on communication. And frankly, Tracy, even if a lot of them are my friends now, when I first started the channel, I was horrified by what I saw. Advice like, imagine everyone in their underwear. I was like, okay, what if they're attractive? Do you just stare at them for the rest of the presentation? Be yourself. What does that mean? Because we're always constantly evolving and changing ourselves as life goes on. The person we were at 15 is not the person we are at 25, 45, etc. So that's too vague. That doesn't make sense either. Be energetic. Well, does be energetic mean this energetic or this energetic or this? So there wasn't enough nuance and detail, and there was a big lack of practicality. So I spent a few hours watching these videos, and I said, you know what? I'm not here to try and be famous or anything. I just know I can make better videos than these guys. So I just started making videos, and they sucked for the first year, but I got better, and I took some money from my corporate job when I used to work at IBM and just poured it into the YouTube channel. The rest was history.
I mean, it's cool. I've got a question, because I know that a lot of people are sort of, when it comes to public speaking, and if you do a bit of research on this, a lot of people would say, oh my God, I would rather die than be on a stage or in front of people having to speak in public. What is your response to that? Like, what would you say to somebody who's like absolutely packing themselves when it comes to having to speak in public?
Absolutely, Tracy. And good to see you as well, Robin. You know, what I would say is at the end of the day, Tracy, fear, funny enough, is not the biggest challenge in communication. The biggest challenge is motivation. So let me explain what I mean here. We're all going to be scared at some level, even me, even the expert on the call. I'll explain what I mean. Let's say me and you are in Melbourne, we're having a coffee, we're having a lunch, and somebody calls me. So I pick up the phone, and it's Elon Musk. And he goes, hey, Brenden, really like your YouTube videos, man. Can you come coach me tomorrow? I'll pay you $1 million and fly you out in my private jet. Would I shit my pants? Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
I would.
Mm.
Can I coach him? Absolutely. Would I be scared and panicking as I'm in that flight to see him in Texas? Yeah, I would be. So what's the point here? There's a couple of points here, but let's start with number one. If your goal is to remove your fear of communication completely, that is the wrong lesson to learn. But rather see it as a dichotomy to manage. Let me explain. Let's say we take a boxing match, Tracy. One side of the boxing match, I love that, Robin. Glad it was useful. One side of the boxing match is the fear, the anxiety, the stress. We're scared about it. I don't want to do it. And then the other side of the ring is the message. Why does this matter? Why is this important? Why should we share it? So for me, it's never been about the fear leaving the ring, but rather making sure that when your message and your fear meet in the middle of that boxing match, that your message gets the knockout punch, that your message wins the match. I started Mass Talk scared, 22-year-old. I have a bachelor's degree in accounting. I have a crooked left arm, and I spent my whole life speaking in a language I didn't know, which was French. Why did I press record? I didn't do it because I wasn't fearful. I did it for the 15-year-old girl who can't afford a communication coach because she can't relate to anyone else. And that message beats out my fear any day of the week.
So what you're saying here, Brenden, is that this is totally about a shift in focus and where we're focusing our attention. So instead of focusing all of our attention on that, oh my God, I'm crapping myself, I'm scared to do this, or focusing totally on the message or on ourselves, that we're actually shifting that, and we're shifting it to, why am I doing what I'm doing? And for you, it is like, there's a 15-year-old girl out there, or boy, that is like, oh my God, I really have got a message to be able to share, but I don't know how to do it. And Brendan's here to actually help guide me and give me some tips, tools, strategies, nuances that are actually going to help me become a much better communicator. So I love that. It's just a simple shift in our focus. I want to ask you this question in terms of, like, when you've got up to speak in public, like, what's the worst thing that's ever happened to you? Let's get that out of the way.
Absolutely happy to talk about it. And one other piece I want to mention is the fear piece, and then we'll jump into the worst experience, and I got a ton of those, so we can spend all interview just doing that. is the point around how do we shift our focus? Because you said something really key there, Trace, that I want to build on. There's actually another more direct way to the bullseye that people can do this, and it's a simple question that everyone can write down. How would your life change if you were an exceptional communicator? Let me repeat that again. How would your life change? How would the world change if you became an exceptional communicator? None of us ask empowering questions around our communication. We do it for our businesses, we do it for our health, we do it for our relationships, but we never do it for our communication. And that's why most of us listening to this podcast do not have communication goals. And that's also why they're not getting results with their communication. So that's why the starting point is, how would my life change if I became an exceptional communicator? Because if I have even a tiny answer, and it doesn't need to be grandiose, it doesn't need to be Tony Robbins, it doesn't need to be Brene Brown, it just needs to be, I want to be a better mother for my children. I want to show up more effectively for the new friendships I'll meet in my life. I want to show up better for my business, the people that I manage at work. Find that thing for you, because if you're motivated enough, trust me, there's so many moments in our life where we've been fearful about something, yet our motivation allows us to push through and get the result that we're looking for.
Yeah, provides you with that momentum and that impetus to just keep going. So in terms of that, and I want to get to kind of like, what's the worst thing that can happen, but let's just kind of park that over there for a minute and we'll come back to that, because again, I want to continue to build on this particular piece now. So in terms of being a better communicator, when you think about the core things that I would need to say that we would need to do to make sure that we're able to communicate in a way that is, I want to say, empathetic, warm, that you actually know and understand the audience that you're speaking to, that the audience feels as though you're actually with them. What are some of the things that you could do to help them feel that you actually really care and you're with them?
Absolutely, Tracy. Fantastic question. So let's bring this back. Why is communication so difficult to master? The reason is because we're trying to juggle 18 balls at the same time. So one of those balls is eye contact, one of them is vocal variety, one of them is empathy, one is how do we get them to feel something, another one is storytelling. And when we try and juggle all 18 of those balls, like in a business, we should do an email list, we should build a website, we should get a funnel. No, just sell something. Sell something. That's all you need to do, right? So we always try and use all of these different balls, juggle them, we go nowhere. Let me build these 10 different businesses. And we do that a lot with communication. So everything that you said was 100% valid. But the only point I would add to that is those are points that I would say are more on the side of ball 7, ball 8, ball 9, ball 10, but very important balls that we can definitely talk about. But let's reverse this a little bit. What's the first ball? What's the first thing that everyone who's listening to this podcast can easily do tomorrow and get results immediately? And this has worked on 100% of all the clients I've coached in my career, provided they do it. So you got to do it. Simple. It's called the random word exercise. Pick a random word, like soup, like ramen, like trophy case, like tissue box, and create random presentations out of thin air. Why is this exercise effective? The reason is because it helps you think on your feet, Tracy. And when you think on your feet, you can start to make sense out of nonsense. And if you can make sense out of nonsense, you can make sense out of anything. So do that a few times a day.
That's such a good exercise. And it's interesting because, when we talk about this communication and sometimes where the fear comes from, is that simple fact that people struggle with trying to come up with how they, like, think about a show, for example. All right, so you're going to do a show, it's for 30 minutes, and then we get into our own head and start thinking, oh my God, how am I going to create enough content or make something make sense for an entire 30 minutes? And that simple exercise of like, all right, let's talk about a pen or talk about this glass and create something out of it on our feet that then enables you to kind of just speak at any given moment makes a huge amount of difference. And it's interesting because I often talk about this even with our students is, if you want to get to a point where you're able to just hit the go button, hit the go live button and just be able to go, right? And be able to be confident enough to be able to speak on really almost any subject matter that you could think of, because you've got so masterful at doing exactly what you've just spoken about, making sense out of nonsense. So So that's kind of the first thing. Let's talk. I mean, I'm sure that there are a multitude of other things that you think are, that you've come to not just think but know are extremely important. And in their, you know, list of priority, what would come next?
That is the right question to ask, Tracy. Love that. So let's go back to what we talked about the random word. Let's move on to ball number 2. And this is something people can write down on a piece of paper. The cure to fear is momentum. The cure to fear is momentum. If you're just focused on doing the random word exercise and somebody's going, do the exercise, do the exercise, do the exercise, you're not really focused on what will people think of me? What will people say of me? If I'm in your face and I go do the random word exercise right now, you'll just do it. And you'll do it again, and again, and not worry about the judgment of other people like 5-year-old kids. When we ask 5-year-olds to do the random word exercise, they don't sit there and go, let me ponder this for a few minutes. Let me think about whether or not this will benefit my social status in society and how people will judge me. They just do the thing. And that's the key. So that's ball number 1. The cure to fear is momentum. Do the random word exercise. What that looks like for the person in the audience is like 3 to 5 times a day. And what that looks like if you're a client is you do it 100 times in 2 weeks or you're fired, right? So it's a different level of energy. So that's 1. Yeah. Number 2, the question drill. This is the one exercise. 2 and 3 are the 2 exercises that if you implement just these 2 things, you'll make the money for the time that you spent listening to this podcast. So number 2 is question drills. Tracy, this is my secret weapon and why I crush sales calls. We get asked questions all the time in our life. On a podcast, sales calls, work, school, family, we get bombarded all the time. But a lot of us, Tracy, are reactive to those questions and not proactive. Example, a few years ago when I started guesting on podcasts, I had no idea what I was doing. So much so that some guy asked me the funniest question. He said, where does the fear of communication come from, Brenden? And I looked at him and I said, Melbourne, London, Los Angeles. Like I just didn't know. Right? It's because I was being reactive. And that's how a lot of us do this. Here's the remedy. Every day, Tracy, all I'm asking for is 5 minutes. 1 question a day will keep the doctor away. Answer and write 1 question you think the world will ask you about your expertise. Your product's too expensive. What's your 90-day policy like? Every single day for 5 minutes. That's it. If you do that for a year, Tracy, everything in your business, everything in your life will be bulletproof because you'll have answered 365 questions about your expertise. And that's why I don't flinch on podcasts, because I've done the question drill so many times. I take this a bit more. I have a more intense version of this where I lock myself in a room for 5 hours and we bombard me with like 300 questions, which I don't recommend for the audience. Starts once a day just to build the momentum. But when you get to that place, doesn't matter if my nearest competitor is 20 years older than me. I'll crush them any day on a sales call because I'll have answers to questions they never even thought of. So for that one prospect who that question is really important for, they ask that other guy or that other girl about it and they don't know the answer and I do, they'll pick me as the vendor every single day. And that's really the key.
That's interesting. I recall reading something. I might not have the person quite right here, but it was a guy by the name of Wyatt Woodall who said that if you can almost like restate or answer a question better than the person who answered it, then they are going to immediately kind of like say, Brendan's got the answer to my problems. If you can reiterate that problem back to them better than they could state it in the first place, then they're automatically going to say, oh my God, I need to work with this guy because he absolutely knows me. And if I remember correctly, I think the guy's name was Wyatt Woodall. It'd be interesting to see if anyone goes and researches that and corrects me, but I think that is correct.
Sounds right to me.
After we've done that, so we've, these are a couple of really great exercises in terms of the random word and then just like the quick fire, 5 minutes a day, coming up with those questions. And secondly, it's interesting you should talk about this too, because my team and I were talking about this just yesterday and saying, look, we want to go back. What one of the team brought up, we need to have a look at our frequently asked questions. And so that actually forms part of that, right? So in your business, whether it be you're creating something online or even a brochure for that matter, we all need to have answers to frequently asked questions. This is a great exercise to help you do that. So now we got a bit of momentum. We're on a bit of a roll. Where do we go next?
Absolutely, Tracy. And one point I'll add, because you actually reminded me of something, especially in the area of business owners. You nailed it on the head with FAQ. I completely agree with you. It's also a way for your team to co-create that experience with the CEO. So they're actually more participated, because you could take all the introverts, all the extroverts, have them write all a bunch of questions about your offer and get input from everyone. It bulletproofs your offer so well. And that's why our offer is solid, right? And that's really the strategy that we coach people on, that people can just do. But the other piece that I'll add is around the random word exercise, and then we'll go to ball 3, which is also a big moneymaker, is the random word exercise. There's 2 things I recommend my CEOs do before they start a meeting. One is they start the meeting with gratitude. What are you grateful for today? Changes the energy of everyone in the room before we talk about the day-to-day business. But there's another exercise too that my clients started doing, that I just started recommending. I thought was really smart, is you start every meeting with a random word exercise. So everyone does the random word exercise once, and then the meeting starts. So that's another couple of easy ways that we can integrate this in our business, instead of going like, okay, where do I find 15 more minutes? No, you got the time. You're in that meeting. So just take that 10 minutes to just float.
It's interesting again that you talk about this, because I think it might have been, I was talking with my husband about this a few weeks ago, and often in business, right, we'll have team meetings, and usually they are, let's talk about the problems that are going on. And like you say, if you can position something right at the outset that really positions the meeting or that conversation in a really positive way, the likelihood of that continuing with the momentum down the positive path is extremely high, rather than opening it with, hey, what's all going on? Why is everybody so grumpy? And what's our problems of the day? And everybody kind of jumps on the grumpy bandwagon. So I absolutely love that whole piece around just being, grateful and acknowledging and having awareness for the really great things that are going on in one's life. Okay, we're at number 3. Give it to me. What's 4?
Yeah, we are. So we're actually still at 2, because I added like a 2.5, but it's good.
Oh, you've got, okay.
You're good. Because I added a 2.5 there, because you had some great insights. So ball number 3 now is so simple, Tracy. It blows my mind how simple this is, yet nobody does it. And before I even give away the insight, let me start with the principle that really is the ethos of my life and my purpose and my thought leadership. This is something people can write down as well. If you communicate 20% better than your competition, you will stand out 100% of the time. Let me repeat that again. If you communicate 20%, not 200%, not 2000%, 20, you will stand out from your competition 100% of the time. That's where exercise number 3 comes in, and even 2 and 1. Random word exercise takes a few minutes. Question drills isn't that hard. Once a day, you do that for a year, you'll kill any podcast interview you do. It's just most people don't put in the work, so they don't get the result. But number 3 is the big one. This is how I make most of my money, because 50% of my business is word of mouth, and I want that to be 100% in the next 18 months. I just do podcasts for fun because it's fun to meet people. So what's the exercise? Make a list of all your current clients, past clients, and send them all video messages on their birthday or during their holiday. Hey, Tracy, just want to say, thinking about you. Happy birthday. I hope you're having a beautiful day. I'm so grateful that I get to work with you. Your energy, your amazing warmth. I'm so grateful. I hope you're having a great day. Wishing you a great week. This makes people's day, because nobody sends them video messages. And let me play this out for you, Tracy. This is not a sales pitch. This is not an upsell. Hey, Tracy, you want to join my next pro? No. Here's what happens. 10% of the time, because I'm usually the only person sending video messages on their birthday or on the holidays. 10% of the time, this is how it goes. Get a text on my phone, I sent 50 video messages. Yesterday, I sent 20 voice notes. And there's always 10% of them, let's say 2 to 5, that go, oh, Brenden, I'm so glad you messaged me. There's this vice president you need to have lunch with. I think he'd be a great client for you. Boom, I just make a few grand in a day. That's it.
Like you said, you started this ball with, it's so simple, yet most people don't do it. And that's just one activity. I mean, I'm going to ask this question because I know this is going to be something that a lot of people will be like wondering. How do you do that simply, Brenden? So in business, when we're really busy, is there a tool or a shortcut or something that you use to make that simple?
Absolutely. So let's simplify all three, because I'll make this bulletproof. So there's zero excuses. Number one, random word exercise. Brett, I don't have 10 minutes. Do you take a shower every day? Raise your hand if you're listening to this and you're taking a shower. If you don't take a shower, I have a different conversation with you to have. But if you're taking a shower every day, you got 10 minutes. Another way to people can do this, for those of you who have children or nieces and nephews, and you're picking them to and from school, or you're going on a vacation with them, that is the best way to do the random word exercise, or during dinner with them, where instead of just doing random music and just putting them on their screen for 3 hours, have them do the random word exercise and you do it too. It's a fun family exercise, and it's how you integrate it, and the kids love it. You'd be surprised. They love it.
Mm.
That's one. Question drill. How do you integrate them? My goodness, if you're not going to make time for question drills, you probably shouldn't be in business. That's my tough love. Because if you can't answer your prospects' questions, you're going to lose money. So the way that I would make this efficient, Tracy, if you don't want to do once a day consistently, because I don't do that, I'll be transparent. What I do instead is I do a much more intense version of that, where I do a 1 day or a 3 hour or a 5 hour, and I bring all the worst people in my network, the most critical people on earth, and they drill me hundreds of questions. And you only have to do that once. If you book 3 hour period once in your life, not once a week, not once a month, once in your life, you will get the result, no doubt. Video messages, don't overthink it. Here's the golden rule of video messages. You are not allowed to redo the video. And let me explain
Mm.
why. Because a lot of people, the objection, right? You can see how much I've done the question,
Mhm,
so I even know the objection that's going to come up
mhm.
is, oh, Brenden, like, what if I don't look good for my clients? What will they think of me? Oh my God, I'm like I'm here. I don't do my makeup. And here's my response to all of this. You don't need to be famous to the world. You're already famous to your clients. People don't realize, Tracy, how much of a fan the people who buy from you and get good results. Obviously, delivery is important. You got to know what you're doing. But assuming that, because if you're not, it's a different conversation on another podcast. If you're really good at what you do, you price them fairly, and you're building a relationship with them, and you're not transactional, they love you. So even if you're half drunk and you're sending them videos, they'll appreciate it. I'll literally give you an example before this interview started, so people can really feel how badly I want to win in life. I'm super sick today. Like, I have a super high fever. And you know how many interviews I did, Tracy? This is my 8th interview today.
Mhm,
I just
mhm.
grinded and pushed. And while I was on my couch 10 minutes for this podcast, I'm coaching my CEO client and sending her 8-minute voice notes and telling her you got to show up that way in the boardroom on Friday, because our business will not build itself on its own. And when you do those types of things, not all the time, you got to protect your health, you will win. And that's my rant for the day.
Mm. Well, I mean, that just shows the level of commitment, right? It's like when you're totally committed to something, you're passionate about it, you just keep on keeping on, you keep going. Absolutely. And get up at 3 a.m. or, when you're not feeling very well, you just keep making that happen. I want to kind of go down this path. I know that there's lots, like you say, I mean, this whole analogy of as business owners, we're constantly juggling various different balls. So I love the fact that you talk about these uh, strategies in the sense of, ball number one, we do this, ball number two, and before long you become that master juggler because it's become second nature. It's like unconsciously competent, right? You just are able to do it. So what's next on the on the agenda? So as we've gone through all of these, and I love those exercises because especially the one where you can really bring this into family life. Like if you've got little ones, I've got grandchildren, I can. Yesterday we were just playing sort of a charades game. So it's a version of charades, right? Same sort of thing, but really getting them to exercise their communication skills, their thinking, the way that they structure things. So I love that, and I would definitely be doing that. But what would you suggest people do next? Because we're starting to layer things on top of one another to become better and better and better at this.
I'm so glad you're asking me the follow up questions nobody else has asked me. So I'm going to add a lot of nuance here that I actually have never shared in a podcast. I'm sure you'll appreciate this. So here's the big piece to ball 3, and then we'll go to ball 4. And it's the following. What's fascinating about these three exercises, Tracy, the random word exercise, the question drill, and the video message, is all three can be integrated in your family. So now how do you
Mm.
do it? The way that you do it is simple. Question drill, all you have to do is you ask your kid a question. That's it. Tell me what's one advice that you would tell your 5-year-old self. Like, make a list of questions that are fun,
Mm-hmm.
not like boring or anything, and have them ask you a question. So there's actually a way to integrate this and ask them follow-up questions in the same way you're interviewing me super well. If we did that with our children, it helps them with their critical thinking and it integrates your own experience, your own learning with everyone else. That's number 2. Number 3, I'm sure you're thinking, well, Brenden, how in the world do we integrate video messages to our kids? Simple. Get your grandmothers, your grandpas, whoever, your relatives they haven't seen in a while, and have your kids send them video messages and help them. It means so
Mm-hmm.
much. Like a few months ago, one of my executive clients, because I coach kids, I don't do a lot of it. Like 3% of my time is on kids, and it's most of my
Mm-hmm.
clients is kids. And what one of my clients did that I loved is he sent me a video message, but it was from his kids. So it's like an
Yeah.
8-year-old going like, Brenden, thanks so much for coaching my dad and me and oh my God, like my heart just burst open. You think I sat there and go like, oh my God, like this kid's filler words are so bad and this kid. No, I wasn't thinking about that at all. I was just focusing on the joy. Oh my God, this means so much to me. So there's actually a way to integrate all of this into your family. So I'm glad you brought up that nuance. That's one piece. The other piece to this that I would add, and then we can move on to ball four, but I want to throw it back to you as well,
Mm-hmm.
Tracy, is the idea that the best way to speak is to speak. I can guarantee you in blood, having coached hundreds of them, Tracy, at this point in my career, even if I'm still young, definitely the count is really high. If you just do the random word exercise, question drills, and video messages, I don't know a single person in the history of my career who is already doing all three things prior to speaking with me. Have listened to me on a podcast. Now, I've seen some people do like one of them, maybe two. Unless they're like a person who's invested a lot into themselves, I have yet to meet someone who's done all three. So if you just do all three and you do nothing else, you win from this podcast. But the problem is most people.
Well, so I want to ask this question. Why do you think most people won't do it? Because, like, I mean, what's really interesting about this, right? And I know even on your podcast, Master Talk, and on the Zoom calls that you do, training, and on the Unlock Show, every single time I do an Unlock Show, they have actionable things that people can walk away from today's episode and actually implement. But like you say, most people don't. I'm interested in your insights. Why? Why don't people
Absolutely.
do that?
Absolutely. Here's what I would say, Tracy. And I got this from Rory Vaden, so it's not my content. Big fan of him. He always says this: discipline is dormant in the absence of a dream. Let me repeat that again.
Mm.
Discipline is dormant in the absence of a dream or vision. So, what does that mean? That means most people who don't take action on this, especially business owners, because that seems to be most of the audience based on our conversation so far, Tracy,
Mm.
they're not thinking big enough about their business and their deeper why. And to help us, because this is not an overnight journey, right? That whole question, how would your life change if you're an exceptional communicator? It seems simple in the front end, but I'm still thinking about it 7 years later. So it's about bringing up that motivation. For example, I'll give you an easy one that digest this, and then I'm happy to share my communication, which is super intense. That's why I drive at the level I do.
Mhm.
So one thing that I force all my CEO clients to do, it's an absolute mandatory to get fired from the program. I'm pretty crazy, as you can probably tell by listening to me, is you have to send a video message to every single employee in your company. I don't care if it's the janitor. I don't care if it's the vice president. I don't care if it's the CEO of the business. Everyone gets a video message just saying one thing that they're grateful for about them. If they're a
Mhm.
janitor, you say, hey, I'm super grateful that you take time to clean the floors and wash up. The office wouldn't look the same without you. And he didn't want to do it. Not because he hated his employees. He runs an amazing company, but because he was scared. So obviously I threatened him a little bit, so he did it. And you know what happened, Tracy? He woke up the next morning and he was crying. And the reason he was crying, because all of those responses shocked him to his core. He got massive paragraphs like, I can't believe the CEO even knows my name, all that stuff. And let's just say his retention skyrocketed. I still haven't gotten a text from him saying one of his employees has left him. And that's the difference maker. It's just being willing to do it. It's just a lot of us don't think big enough about our lives or our businesses to pull through with this.
I mean, I think that activity is such a powerful thing, right? And for most employees, you just want to know that you're appreciated, that someone even knows your name, and knows that the contribution that you make to their company. So I am not surprised that he woke up that next morning and got that level of gratitude. Always comes back. Right? People will reciprocate with that and say, I'm just so grateful that you even know who I am, and even getting to the point where you know that person and their family so well that they don't leave. Um, any research that you do around why people leave businesses is generally not because they don't like the business. It's generally because they don't, there's a lack of communication or a lack of empathy or a lack of connection or whatever it is with their immediate boss and potentially with the hierarchy above them. So being able to take that from the top all the way down, that just is a huge cultural change that you can make within a company just by doing that one simple thing. Because I can only imagine, as the companies that you work with get bigger and bigger and bigger, if that's a behavior that the CEO is doing from the top level, it will disseminate its way down and it becomes the way we do things around here. I love that.
10 out of 10 share. I love that perspective. Absolutely, Tracy.
Yeah. Okay. So, video. Let's talk about this because I know a lot of people also. I mean, look, you and I are on a live show today, right? So, one of the things that you mentioned a little bit earlier was, no, you don't. I don't allow you to do a video and then re-record. It's like you're live, baby. It's what you say is what you get. What you see is what you get. It is just that, and it's no different with live video. I mean, you might do your YouTube channel slightly different, but I kind of have chosen to go this path, mainly because being somebody who could be, err on the side of perfectionism a little and be like, oh God, I didn't say that right, I didn't look right, delete, and then nothing ever gets done. I found for me personally that having this type of format where you go live makes it simpler for me because I just get to push a button and go live, and you actually have to practice this random word thing every single time you go live, right? Because you don't always know. As much as you can try and prepare as best you can for any question that comes your way, sometimes you might be hit with something a little bit random, particularly if you're the host, right? The host is a little bit different because you're having to guide and take the listeners on a bit of a journey through the questioning that you ask. So now that we've kind of been through this, we've got random word, we've got our the question drill, we've got our gratitude, we've got video messaging. What do you recommend we do next?
Absolutely. I would say just with that's probably the bulk of the interview. But if I had to add one more, and obviously there's a ton more, but then people won't implement,
Mm.
is a strategy I teach called puzzle. So communication, Tracy, is like a jigsaw puzzle. You know those toy pieces we used to do as kids with those puzzles? So whenever I ask people, what pieces do you start with first when you're doing a jigsaw puzzle, most of them answer the edges, and they would be right to say that. Why? Because they're easier to find in the box. Put the edges together and work your way into the middle. So why am I bringing that up? I'm bringing that up because in communication and presentation structure specifically, when we prep presentations, we generally do the opposite, unfortunately. We start with the middle first. We shove a bunch of content. We get to the presentation, like a sales pitch. We're talking to a B2B potential client, and we just ramble throughout the whole thing. Blah, 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 blah. And then the last slide's on something like this. Thanks. It's like horrible. So instead, what I'd recommend is a better way to practice presentations more efficiently that I call jigsaw puzzle method. Start with the edges first. So do the introduction 20 times, 30 times, not once. 20, 30 times seems like a big number, Tracy, but the answer is it's not. And the reason it's not is because your introduction is 60 to 90 seconds. You'll be done in 45 minutes, tops. Same thing with the close. What's a great movie with a terrible ending? Last time I checked, terrible movie. Same thing with the close. Nail the conclusion. Do that 20, 30 times, and then tackle the middle. And if you do it in that order, you have a lot more momentum, confidence in your presentation. You'll bring more energy, and your audience will feel like you're spectacular, even if the middle falls a bit flat, because they'll be so enamored by the way you started your presentation. But if you do the opposite, you're finished.
I mean, totally. It's interesting, isn't it? And I think what I'm hearing here today too is that it's practice, practice, practice. It's not like we learn communication and you're totally done. It's you're constantly sharpening that communication sword over and over and over again. However, it doesn't actually have to be difficult with these very basic things that you've given us today, simple and not difficult to do. You can become a really well crafted, well rounded, effective communicator really, really quickly by doing these simple things that Brenden has shared with us today. So, what I want to say to you guys, if you are listening to today's show and you at all want to improve your communication skills, what do you need to do? Take his advice. Note down, go back, re-listen to today's episode and just note down all the things that Brenden has spoken about and start implementing them into your day and making sure that you do them over and over and over again. Because like Brenden said, one of the things that we need to do is create discipline. Create what I want to come back to this too. Because to get that discipline and to get that momentum and to ensure that you actually are going to stick with this, it is connecting this with your vision and your dream. So start there. What is that vision and dream that you have? What a difference are you wanting to make in the world and even closer to home, to your own life, to your family's life? What does that actually look like? Then absolutely connect what you are doing to that dream. Because if you can have that as your North Star and keep moving towards it on a constant basis, that is going to provide you with the momentum to maintain a level of consistency and discipline that will have you outplaying, outwitting, outshining any of your competition over and over and over again. That's the recipe for a winner.
I mean, great summary. I love it.
Thank you. Right. So that being said, I want to kind of finish with this question, and I haven't forgotten that I'm going to ask you again. What's the worst thing that has happened to you as a presenter? And I know you've got multiple, so I know everyone likes to have a bit of a giggle, and also not just laugh at you, have a bit of a giggle at your expense, but to understand that even the best have moments that don't go so well. So pick yourself up and move on. So the question I've got before I get to that and we round out today's show is how much does a presentation, a visual presentation, have to play in any kind of communication? Does it matter? Does it not matter? Like, what's the most important piece?
Visual means slides, right, Tracy? Just want to make sure that's clear.
Yeah. So I know that a lot of people kind of get hung up on, I've got to make pretty slides and I need to do a really nice presentation. I want to know, does that really matter?
Right. So I would say the answer is difficult because there are a lot of great speakers do both. Some of them don't use slides at all, like Gary Vaynerchuk, and other people use slides all the time, like Tony Robbins and Seth Godin. So what I would say to that is do what works for you. Personally, the framework I teach clients is start with the deck first, so it's easier for you to remember the content. And whether you use the deck or not is not important. Be sure you're able to spit out the keynote without the slides anyways. That's kind of the way that I've always approached it. But personally, I would say most of my keynotes I have slides just because it's easier for people to take notes. But I'm equipped in a way, and you need to be, where even if your slides aren't working, you're able to deliver the key message. I'll say most of the time, especially for business owners, it's not a big deal. Just be sure you're able to deliver the same quality with or without slides, and you practice both iterations.
Sorry, I've got one other question that I think is really important too.
Please.
And how much does body language and voice articulation in our voice and those sorts of things come into play. Because we can have a great message, a great presentation, but presented poorly can either fall flat on its face or be like, ooh, standing ovation. And I might have
Absolutely.
just answered that question.
No, you're all good. So body language and articulation are important, but with the nuanced conversation we had at the beginning, here's the way I personally think about it. But obviously, I don't have the truth in gold here. I would say for me, body language is more like ball 15, and I'll tell you why. The reason is because it's very rare for people to make mistakes with their body. Usually, the mistakes that they make that are very poignant is in their face. So if they're not
Mm,
smiling enough, they don't have expression.
mm,
But other than that, I usually don't really coach people on body language until they're like really, really good. Like they've done the random word exercise hundreds of times and they're really confident. Then I'll nitpick them. That's what I would say on body language. Voice articulation is more ball. I'm just throwing numbers here, but it's probably ball like 7 or 8, where you're practicing different tones. So this is very advanced. Once again, I want to re-emphasize: if you have not booked time to do the question drill, the random word exercise, video message, this is going to go over your head. Like if you're not doing that, you're not going to do this. Which is understanding the different tones in our body, Tracy. 3 different tones: high tones, how we normally speak, normal tones, and low tones. And what the best
mm.
speakers on the planet do is they're roller coasters. So I'll give you an example, and you use all 3 at the same time. Danny believes in a dream that only he can achieve. And if all of you today really start thinking about what is your dream, notice I'm going high, low, high, low, high, low. That's what the pros do, but probably a bit too complicated for today.
Mhm. Well, yes and no, because when you listen to that, I mean, if everybody just goes back and listens to that one segment that you just used to demonstrate that there, you kind of get to feel what that made you feel based on tone, based on the highs and lows and the articulation in your voice, because you were able to draw people in through the use of tone in your voice. So I love that. I mean, we are getting, we could go really deep into all of this because it's really fascinating and interesting. But for, like you say, for today's session, it is just a matter of giving everybody, here's some really, if you do these 3 things that Brenden has spoken about today, you're going to be winning. That these 3 things are super simple and they're going to put you ahead of the pack. So let's just make sure that everybody knows, because they would have listened to today and gone, gosh, there's some fantastic, um, gold nuggets that Brenden has dropped today, and I'm going to implement those, but I want more. So if somebody did want more, where are the best places they can go to get more of Brenden? Like, they absolutely should go and listen to Master Talk, right? That goes without saying. Master Talk podcast. Where can that be found?
Absolutely, Tracy. And thank you so much for your energy. You've really recharged my batteries. So I'm super, super grateful to have spoken with you today. Thanks for the time. So 2 ways to keep in touch. The first, well, actually, I'll say 3 things. So the first 2 is how to keep in touch. The first one is the Master Talk YouTube channel. Just go on youtube.com, type Master Talk in one word, and you'll have access to hundreds of free videos on how to communicate. That's one. And number 2, attend one of my Zoom calls. I do a free training every 2 weeks, and you can register for that at rockstarcommunicator.com. And these are live trainings. So this is not a recorded webinar. I'm on the training. It's super fun and it's interactive. Last thing that I'll leave you with is the golden question that we had talked about time. So I want to make sure that's answered, is what's the biggest mistake I've made in my career? I mean, so many. Let me list off a couple for you, Tracy. One, when I started guesting on podcasts, it was during the pandemic. So I couldn't cut my hair for 6 months. So if you look online, you type my name, you'll see some interviews I do where I have like a big fat shed of hair. It's hilarious. So that's one. Second is my older videos when I was getting started. They're shit. Like I'm just sitting there and I'm on a couch. I'm moving my legs around. It's weird, a little bit awkward to watch. So there's that. But the biggest one I would say was 3 or 4 years ago. I was asked to deliver a keynote in front of like 300-400 people, and then I got for kids, and I got to the presentation, Tracy, and I prepped like crazy for months, like a month or two. And I got there and I found out 15 minutes before, not like 15 days before, 15 weeks, just a few minutes before I got on stage. The girl looked at me and she said, "Oh, Brenden, forgot to mention, half of this audience doesn't speak English. Can you do half of your presentation in French?" And I just went, "What?" They're like, "Yeah, just translate half of it and we'll be fine." And in my head, I was like, I am finished. Obviously, I'm fluent in French because I live in Montreal, but it's not my second language, and I hadn't practiced in it. And I was about to give my biggest keynote at the time, which was like 400 people, and I was like, shit. So I had to really calm my nerves, and that was a really real test for me. But we pulled through, minus some big grammar mistakes in French as I was translating along the way.
Well, as a true professional, I'm sure you just sort of took it all in your stride. You might have been crapping yourself behind the scenes, but I'm sure once you got out on that stage, you killed it. And and sometimes it is just a bit of, we just got to give things a crack, right? We just got to give it a go, do the best, give it the best shot you've got. And most people, they might have found your little grammatical errors a little humorous and funny, and it just added to the whole quirk of the presentation. So guys, what I want to say is, the key to this is, if you are wanting to use your communication skills, which everybody has, it's just a matter of like fine tuning them, sharpening our sword from time to time. And the more you do it over and over and over again, the better you become. Like Brenden said, I remember back in my early days of doing even this show, go back and watch some of those. No, don't, because they're really bad. They're actually not bad, but you could see that I was nervous and all of that sort of stuff. And you've got all the things that you're trying to do, whereas as you do it more and more and more, you just become a lot more comfortable in what you're doing. So that being said, guys, I think I have got the URL correct at the bottom of the screen here, rockstarcommunicator.com. Is that correct, Brenden? So we'll also put that into the show notes, guys. So click on there and head on over to Rockstar Communicator, and then you can have more of a relationship with Brenden. And of course, he's just given you an opportunity to catch up with him for 90 minutes on a regular basis to sharpen your tools. Use what you've heard today in today's podcast. If you want to go deeper, you want to get a little bit more, assistance from somebody as skilled as Brenden, take him up on his offer. He's given it to you guys for free today. Make sure you do that. And of course, there's those 100-odd videos or more over at Master Talk. Find them on YouTube. So I want to say thank you so much for being an amazing guest today, Brenden. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the Unlock Show. And I know, just like every other, amazing guest we have, you have really dropped some gold nuggets, and you've given people the opportunity to be able to take away all of this information for free and start implementing it. You've given them the keys to success. So thank you for doing that. I appreciate it.
Pleasure is absolutely mine. Thanks for having me.
All right, guys. Well, let's call today's show to a close. I want to say thank you to everybody for being here today. It's always a pleasure to be with you guys on the Unlock Show. As you know, we'll be back again with another episode Friday, 10 a.m. and again next week at 10 a.m. Brisbane time on Wednesday with another amazing guest. Until then, go and live your life unlocked, because as you know, I always say there is just no other way. Thanks, everybody. Bye for now.